You're driving through the back roads of Massachusetts at 1:47 in the morning when your GPS quietly gives up on life. No dramatic warning, no loud error tone. The map simply freezes, then the signal disappears. Rain drags itself across the windshield in long, uneven streaks, while the forest crowds closer to the road on both sides, swallowing whatever little moonlight was left. Your headlights carve through the trees for a few desperate feet before the darkness folds back in again, like it owns the place. And maybe it does. The heater inside your car is running, but the air suddenly feels colder. Not naturally cold, not winter cold, dead space cold, the kind that makes the tiny hairs on your arms stand up before your brain understands why. You check your phone, no bars, of course. Because apparently every horror story in America operates under the same cellular plan. A burst of static crackles through the radio. You flinch. For half a second, underneath the white noise, you swear you hear something breathing, then silence. Not normal silence either. No insects, no wind, no rustling leaves. The forest has gone completely still. That's when you see it standing between the trees about 30 yards ahead, small. Too small to be an adult. Its shape is crooked somehow, like its joints were assembled from memory instead of anatomy. It doesn't move and wave. Doesn't react to the headlights washing over the bark around it. It just stands there. Watching, you tell yourself it's probably a kid. Which would honestly be worse, because no child should be standing motionless in the woods at nearly 2 in the morning, while rainwater drips from branches that somehow aren't moving. Your thumb hits the lock button. Click. Safe, right? Then something taps softly against the rear passenger window. 3 slow knocks. You turn too fast and see nothing except your own reflection staring back at you with wide eyes and the kind of expression usually found moments before terrible decisions. Another knock. Closer this time. Your GPS suddenly flickers back to life. The screen glitches violently before displaying a single line of text. Don't follow the voice. And then you hear it, your name spoken softly from somewhere deep in the forest. Not shouted. Not distorted, just familiar enough to make your stomach drop. Because it sounds like someone you know. That's the problem with old forests. People think the danger is getting lost. It isn't. The real danger is that something out there already knows exactly how to guide you deeper. And few things understand that better than the Pukwudgie, blurred. A creature from Wampanoag folklore, often mistaken for some harmless, goblin-like forest spirit by people who clearly have a survival instinct shaped like a broken shopping cart. That misunderstanding usually doesn't last long. Because the Pukwudgie doesn't hunt the way predators normally do, it doesn't chase, it doesn't roar, it doesn't need to. It simply waits for your curiosity to become stronger than your fear. And trust me, human beings make that trade constantly. Welcome back. Tonight, we're dissecting one of the oldest psychological predators hidden inside North American folklore. A creature that doesn't kill you first. It convinces you to walk willingly into the dark. Long before settlers built roads through these woods, before convenience stores started selling burnt coffee 24 hours a day, and long before people began turning ancient spirits into internet aesthetics with lo-fi music playing in the background, the Wampanoag already knew something lived here. Something small, something clever, and something deeply offended by humanity's continued existence. The Pukwudgie wasn't originally described as purely evil. That's the important part. Most people assume monsters begin as monsters, but folklore rarely works that way. The oldest entities usually start with a relationship that went wrong, and according to Wampanoag oral traditions, Pukwudgies once coexisted with humans. Cord once. The forests of the Northeast weren't viewed as empty wilderness by the tribes who lived there. They were living systems. Every river had intention. Every hill had memory. Every stretch of woodland carried presence. To walk into the trees wasn't just entering nature, it was entering territory that noticed you. Modern society really struggles with that idea. Mostly because we've trained ourselves to think anything without Wi-Fi coverage is automatically unimportant. The Pukwudgies existed somewhere between spirit and flesh. Small humanoid beings tied directly to the forest itself. Tricksters by nature, unpredictable, intelligent, occasionally helpful, occasionally. Which is folklore language for good luck with that. Then came Maushop, a giant from Wampanoag legend, a colossal culture hero said to shape coastlines, move islands, and protect humanity. Imagine if Paul Bunyan had divine authority and significantly less patience. According to the stories, the Pukwudgies admired Maushop at first, followed him constantly, tried to imitate him, but admirations slowly became resentment after the giant grew tired of their behavior and cast them away from human settlements. Humiliation changed them. And that transformation matters because nearly every terrifying entity in folklore is born from the same emotional core. Rejection. The Pukwudgies didn't simply become hostile, they became personal. Suddenly, livestock disappeared, travelers vanished near wooded trails. Strange lights moved between trees at night. Hunters reported hearing familiar voices calling from places no human could survive alone. The forest itself started behaving incorrectly. That's what makes this legend psychologically dangerous. The Pukwudgie doesn't represent brute force. It represents nature developing hostility toward human presence. And honestly, considering what humanity has done to forests over the last few centuries, fair enough, the more modern researchers analyze the folklore, the stranger it becomes. Because the stories remain weirdly consistent across generations. People hear voices, people become disoriented, people follow something into the woods. And people don't come back the same if they come back at all. Even more unsettling is the belief that Pukwudgies specifically target emotional vulnerability, grief isolation, curiosity, shame. Emotional instability acts like a flare in the dark, which means the creature doesn't just know where you are, it knows what hurts. And once something in the forest learns your name, learns your guilt, or learns the exact tone of voice that makes you lower your guard, the woods stop feeling like trees. They start feeling conscious. Predators usually rely on speed or strength or venom. The Pukwudgie relies on something much older and much more efficient. Your own decision-making. That's what makes this thing terrifying. Because if a bear attacks you, at least your brain understands the situation. Run, ho, panic professionally, standard survival behavior. But the Pukwudgie doesn't trigger the part of your brain that screams danger immediately. It triggers curiosity first. And curiosity has ended more human beings than almost every apex predator combined. You're hiking alone when the forest starts feeling wrong. Not dangerous. Wrong, the trail hasn't changed, but somehow the trees look taller now, denser. The air smells damp, like wet soil mixed with old leaves decomposing somewhere beneath your boots. You hear branches shifting behind you every few minutes, but whenever you stop walking, the sound stops too. Classic predator pacing. Only this predator understands restraint. That's the first phase. Presence, the Pukwudgie wants you aware of it, not enough to flee, just enough to become mentally distracted. Your survival instincts start burning energy, trying to identify patterns that never fully appear. You keep looking over your shoulder, you keep listening. And the more attention you give the forest, the more the forest starts responding back. Then comes the lure. Maybe it's a flashlight moving between the trees. Maybe it's someone calling your name. Maybe it's laughter. Soft, childlike, almost playful. You tell yourself there must be another hiker nearby. That assumption is exactly why missing person documentaries keep getting 6 seasons. The voice moves deeper into the woods, not fast enough to lose, just far enough to follow. That detail matters because the Pukwudgie doesn't force movement, it manipulates momentum. Every step feels self-inflicted. You believe you're choosing to continue. Until you realize the trail disappeared 20 minutes ago. The deeper you go, the stranger reality behaves. Your phone battery drains too quickly. The compass spins. You pass the same broken tree 3 separate times despite walking in a straight line. Then the sounds begin. Footsteps behind you, not matching your rhythm. Something small moving parallel between the trees. The forest no longer feels empty. It feels occupied, and worse, aware. This is where the psychological mimicry starts. According to multiple folklore accounts, the Pukwudgie can imitate familiar voices, Not perfectly, almost perfectly, which somehow makes it worse. There's always a slight delay, a strange emphasis on certain words. Like something rehearsing human behavior without fully understanding emotion. You hear your brother calling for help, or your mother, or someone you haven't spoken to since the funeral. That's the horrifying part. The creature doesn't simply exploit fear, it exploits grief. Human beings are biologically wired to respond to familiar distress signals. The Pukwudgie weaponizes that instinct the same way anglers use bait. And by the time you realize the voice is leading you somewhere impossible, you're already lost. Then you finally see it clearly. Standing between two trees, roughly 4 feet tall, its limbs are slightly too long, its posture bends at angles that feel mechanically incorrect. Its eyes reflect light like an animal's, but the expression behind them feels disturbingly human, not emotional, observational, like it's studying you. Its smile stretches wider, and suddenly every survival instinct that failed to activate earlier slams into your nervous system all at once. Too late because the forest behind you is silent now. No insects, no wind, no distant highway. Just that thing staring at you from the dark with the patient confidence of something that already knows you're not finding your way back. Not everyone encounters a Pukwudgie. That's the first thing you need to understand. If these entities were truly attacking random people indiscriminately, every campground in New England would have turned into a federally monitored disaster zone sometime around 1987. No, according to the folklore, the forest chooses carefully. And the people most likely to experience a Pukwudgie encounter tend to share one uncomfortable trait. They're already emotionally vulnerable before entering the woods. Grief, isolation, loneliness, guilt, obsession. The kinds of emotions modern society tells people to suppress until they start leaking out in strange ways at 3 in the morning. That's why so many alleged encounters happen during transitional moments in life, after breakups, after funerals, during periods of depression, during long stretches of emotional exhaustion where reality already feels slightly disconnected. The Pukwudgie doesn't create weakness. It waits for weakness that already exists. And honestly, that makes the creature feel less like a monster and more like an ancient psychological infection hiding inside the wilderness. You notice this pattern everywhere once you start looking for it. People wandering into forests after arguments. People hiking alone to clear their thoughts. People trying to escape stress by disconnecting from civilization for a weekend. Strategy. Because isolation has always been the perfect hunting ground for things that imitate human connection. The more folklore researchers compare modern witness accounts, the stranger the overlap becomes. Victims consistently describe the same progression. First comes emotional discomfort, then fascination, then the feeling that the forest somehow understands them personally. That last detail matters. Because the Pukwudgie doesn't behave like an animal defending territory. It behaves like something studying emotional entry points, almost conversationally. And if that sounds disturbingly similar to modern internet algorithms slowly learning human behavior patterns, yeah. The forest figured out engagement farming centuries before social media executives turned it into a billion-dollar business. Think about it, an entity that watches silently, learns your emotional state, rewards curiosity, keeps drawing you deeper, makes escape harder the longer you stay engaged. At some point, the line between supernatural folklore and modern psychology starts getting uncomfortably thin, especially when you're alone, especially right now. Because, let's be honest for a second, you're probably listening to this in a dark room, maybe under blankets, maybe wearing headphones while pretending this story isn't affecting you as much as it clearly is. And now every tiny sound in your house suddenly feels a little suspicious. That clicking noise in the hallway, the shifting shadows near the doorway, the weird silence between passing cars outside. Your brain is scanning for patterns now, exactly the way the forest wants. Some theories suggest the Pukwudgie isn't even a single creature. Instead, it may represent the collective defense mechanism of ancient wilderness itself, an immune response against human intrusion, a living hostility hidden inside old forests, which would explain why encounters often escalate after people disrespect the environment around them, mucking the woods, ignoring warnings, entering sacred spaces carelessly. Human beings have an incredible talent for treating ancient places like temporary content creation zones. The forest apparently has opinions about that. And according to some legends, once a Pukwudgie successfully attaches itself to someone psychologically, distance stops mattering. People report hearing whistles outside apartment windows, tiny footprints near bedroom doors, soft knocking sounds after midnight, not aggressive potterbin. Like something waiting for permission to enter your life completely. Because once the forest learns how your mind works, it doesn't always stay in the forest. So how do you survive a Pukwudgie encounter? Technically speaking, you probably don't, but folklore does offer a few defensive strategies. Ancient people survived by respecting patterns, and the patterns surrounding the Pukwudgie are surprisingly consistent. First rule, never follow the voice. Doesn't matter who it sounds like, your mother, your best friend, someone crying for help in the woods. If the sound leads away from safety and deeper into isolation, ignore it. Human empathy is beautiful. Unfortunately, it also makes us extremely easy to lure into terrible situations. Second, leave immediately if the forest goes silent. That silence matters more than footprints or shadows. Predators disturb ecosystems, birds stop singing, insects disappear. Wind itself starts feeling restrained somehow. The woods should never feel paused, and if they do, you're no longer alone out there. Third, never mock the forest. That advice sounds ridiculous. Right up until you notice how many encounter stories begin with someone laughing at local warnings 5 minutes before reality starts malfunctioning around them. Ancient cultures respected wilderness because they understood something modern society forgot. Nature doesn't hate you, but it also doesn't care if you survive. That's an important distinction. Some traditions also recommend avoiding isolated travel at night, refusing strange lights between trees, and never responding to whistles heard after dark, especially whistles. Nothing good has ever followed the sentence. Hey guys, did you hear that? At this point, you're probably wondering whether any of these methods actually work, sometimes briefly. But survival becomes difficult because the Pukwudgie doesn't overpower you physically first. It destabilizes you psychologically. And once fear, exhaustion, and disorientation fully set in, human beings start making catastrophic decisions remarkably fast. Which brings us to the official survival probability. Survival chance 18%. And honestly, that number feels generous. Because the people most vulnerable to the Pukwudgie are usually the exact people least capable of recognizing they're being manipulated in the first place. Lonely people, curious people, grieving people, people trying to escape something. The forest notices those individuals. And according to the stories, it calls to them softly. So if you hear knocking outside your window tonight, don't rush to check immediately. If you hear your name whispered from somewhere dark, don't answer automatically. And if the woods ever start sounding human, run not because you'll definitely escape, but because standing still is exactly what the forest wants. Sasuber if you want more forbidden case files, or don't. The things hiding in old forests honestly prefer fewer witnesses anyway. Stay safe out there. And remember, curiosity may have killed the cat, but in the case of the Pukwudgie, it usually kills the map first.